We should be good to go.
Okay, all right. Thanks for coming. All of you here zooming in. Great to see you here. And we have someone here in room 113 at the International Center. And can I ask your name?
I'm Lily.
Lily?
Yeah.
Okay, great to have you. Okay, welcome. And today I'll be talking about the proposed study abroad program, which I'm proposing to lead in the first session of summer 2023. And I know that's a little ways away, but it'll come sooner than we imagine. And so we are underway to make plans. It's pending approval, but I want to let students know what's in the works and to let you know about the theme that I'll be focusing on as the director of the program and some of the places that we are planning to visit. They are each currently planned to be in southern Germany and in Austria, so two German-speaking countries. The program, though, is in English, so I want to assure that all students are welcome to, they will be welcome to apply to the program, pending approval. And I just want to clarify that while we will be visiting Germany and Austria, there will be a point made to offer the program in English. Of course, those of you who are interested specifically in German-speaking Europe, it is a great opportunity to visit that part of the world. And it will give you the chance, if you are taking German, to be immersed in the culture and the language there. But if you haven't been taking German or don't plan to take German between now and the proposed time frame, that's perfectly fine. I'll be doing lots of translating and interpretation, and we will also have programs set up with people who are English speaking. Okay, so I want to clarify that. I am Associate Professor of German in the Department of World Languages and Cultures, and we appreciate the opportunities that we have working with the Office of Global Engagement and other partners on campus to help facilitate these opportunities for students. All right, let me first introduce a bit about the themes and the places that are proposed to be part of the program. We'll be focusing on the relationship of German and Austrian culture to nature and the natural world. And we'll highlight the role of environmentalism and sustainability in social and cultural practice in southern Germany and Austria, along with the theme of nature in art, literature, and everyday life. We will be meeting during spring semester of 2023. So the program is it will be part of a course as planned, and that'll be German 350. It'll be offered as a 3-credit course. So the course will entail weekly meetings or meeting every 2 weeks or so, either in person or virtually. We'll work that out. And then that will lead to the actual trip itself, which would be planned to take place in the first segment of summer session. And that normally takes place in late May to early June, just to give you a sense of the time frame. So places that we would plan to visit in Germany would include Munich, one of the largest cities in Germany, and certainly the largest in southern Germany. And in addition to spending time in Munich, I'm proposing to visit the famous Neuschwanstein Castle, otherwise known as the Disney Castle. That's the German castle on which the famous Disney castle is modeled. And then also the town of Munau, which is south of Munich. And Munau became quite famous in the early 1900s as a major art colony, and was home to a lot of artists who worked in what's called the expressionist movement, the modernist movement during that time. And we would have the chance to see the Castle Museum in Munich, which houses many of those expressionist works that also feature depictions of the natural world and the interplay between the town and the surrounding mountains and the lake. So sticking with that theme of the natural world in art. And in Austria, we would plan to see Salzburg, right on the German-Austrian border, very famous city as the setting for Sound of Music, among other things for which it's famous. I'm not planning to take the Sound of Music tour, but we will visit some places that are featured in that film. Also, we would plan to visit the Steyr Valley, a bit east of Salzburg, and prospectively visit a family farm, spend some time on a farm and see how farms articulate this idea of culture meeting nature in many ways. And then we would spend time in the capital city of Vienna, also like Munich, a major Central European metropolis, and we'll have the chance to see the role of nature and aspects of the environment that are important in an urban setting. And then the city of Graz, and a major motivation for us to visit Graz is the fact that is a partner university with the University of Graz. And so it's always nice to touch base with our partners there. And there were in fact representatives from the University of Graz on an earlier session today. So important relationship that we have with this beautiful city of Graz. It's the second largest city in Austria, and it's a major university city. So it has a lot of affinities to a place like Missoula. So this is planned to be a 2 to 3 week experience. I'm planning to have it cost less than $3,000 per person, which would come out to about $1,000 a week, which I know is a fair amount of money, but with traveling and taking care of some amenities and entrance fees for museums and sites of interest, that's still a relatively inexpensive study abroad experience compared to other programs that you might find out there. So I'm doing my best to keep the budget such that it would be affordable for people to participate in. And I can also point out that there are financial support opportunities through my academic department, World Languages and Cultures. And there are, of course, other campus sources that we could direct you to help you make such a trip a reality for you, hopefully. So do keep that in mind when you consider potential costs. Okay, well, our first stop will be Munich. And here we have a nice panorama of the Munich airport. And the airport itself and the city itself is pretty much on the flatlands of the Bavarian plain, P-L-A-I-N, not to be confused with the P-L-A-N-E, taking off from the airport there. It's one of Germany's largest airports. And in the background, you can then see the Alps. Right? Munich is certainly famous for its proximity to the beautiful Alps, which are a major destination for tourists, both in, for all seasons. Certainly in the winter for the great skiing. We would be there in late May to early June, and that's also a lovely time of year. And the Alps are certainly very popular during the late spring and the summer. It's beautifully green, and flowers are out, and it's a particularly lively time that should be enjoyable to visit, both the area around Munich and the Alps themselves, which we will have the chance to see a bit more closely and personally than we see in this image from outside the Munich airport. And after people arrive at the airport, which will involve your own individual travel plans. So your travel plans to Munich will be independent. So those won't be included in the program costs. So do keep that in mind. But once once we arrive at the airport, I'll work out the logistics of how we set that up. But the most convenient way to get from the airport to Munich itself, which is about a half-hour away, the airport's fairly far from the city center itself. There's very convenient suburban train transportation, and our experience on this suburban train will be an example of how omnipresent railways are in Europe as a whole, and train travel is certainly a major part of life across Europe, and certainly in Germany and Austria. So it won't take long before we're switching from whatever mode of transportation that gets you to Munich, likely flying, then onto a train. And it's about a half-hour train ride, and that will then give you the chance to experience a decent stretch of time as we then come to the core of the city. This train goes directly from the airport into downtown Munich. So among the things that we'll hope to see very soon after our arrival, after we rest up and hopefully spend a relaxing evening first. But one of the first things I want to show the group will be the Viktualienmarkt in Munich, which is basically an open air market downtown, and it serves as a nice connection between the city and the countryside, and again showing that relationship between urban life and not the pristine natural surroundings per se, but the way that farms and agricultural areas represent that meeting point between the natural world and farm culture, and the importance of growing food of various sorts. And while there's food from all over the place at this open air market, there is definitely a presence of local produce, which you'll have the chance to hopefully at least see, if not enjoy. The fee for the program as a whole will include some group meals. And so I hope that soon into our stay, we'll have the chance to enjoy a group meal. And there are a number of places at the Viktualienmarkt, at this open air market, that serve tasty food. There is the Suppenküche, the soup kitchen, as it's literally called in German. Here I allude to it as the soup house. And you see a nice example of some pea soup there with some garnishing. And if you're able to eat bread of whatever sort, you will enjoy the many offerings from bakeries in general, and certainly bread is among them throughout Germany and Austria. And they do also serve gluten-free breads and pastries otherwise throughout the area. Okay, we certainly won't be missing out on the chance to visit the Marienplatz, the center square in Munich. And one of the themes I'd like to follow while we're in Munich, which is a landlocked city, not on any ocean or lake, and Bavaria, the state in which it's located, is also landlocked. But water is a fun motif throughout the city of many fountains. There are lakes and ponds and canals that represent a really nice sort of interplay between urban culture, urban life, and the importance of water. And one such example of that is the fish fountain, which is just down from the square, and it's a nice place for people to hang out. And I don't know how warm it might get by the end of May, but when it gets warm, it's a nice place for people to just hang out and enjoy the refreshing breeze that you can actually feel around many of these fountains from the action of the water. A body of water, as it were, that is found in Munich is the Isar River. That's the main river. It's not a huge river by any means, but it's definitely a presence, and much of the city is sort of oriented toward this nice, rather lush river that basically lies between downtown and other parts of the city. And here we see the Isar on the left of the image there, lined with lovely trees. Here they're in nice leafy presence, looking like perhaps late spring or summer. I aim to get images that depict the time of year where we would plan to go. Munich is also famous for its English garden. Munich's in Germany, but the most famous park there arguably is the English garden in English, Englischer Garten in German. And we'll visit the English garden, and part of our visit there will involve thinking about and learning about the history of open spaces in general in cities. Many areas that became parks and open spaces were historically royal grounds, and that was the case with what became the English Garden. They were basically owned and enjoyed by the aristocracy and the royalty. One of our themes in class will be to look at the social change that was involved from the transfer of these open spaces eventually to public spaces, and you know, how that reflects cultural and political evolution from a very hierarchical system to one where the public became more of a player in terms of how land and spaces were used. And of course, very importantly, for the sake of just being able to relax, enjoy aspects of the natural world, and to recreate, even in very large cities like Munich. So one fun thing to see in the English Garden is the Eisbach, which is a canal that runs through the English Garden. And Eisbach literally means the ice creek. Okay, and there's a famous surf wave there, not unlike Brennan's wave here in Missoula. The Eisbach surf wave definitely predates Brennan's wave. It was one of the first waves that people started to surf on in urban parks, and I don't have any official activity where our group will be surfing the Eisbach, but we will definitely visit the Eisbach and see what's going on there. And I can say even in inclement cold weather, you'll find people out there surfing the Eisbach. Here's a group, and you can see how politely they're waiting in line for a chance to surf the Eisbach. And we'll visit this in light of studying and experiencing the significance of urban recreation. We'll also talk about the role of sustainability in consumer culture. Here's an example of a store in Munich called Ohne in German, and Ohne means without. And there they feature products that are not packaged. So it's an example of cutting down on the use of packaging as a whole. Shoppers bring their bags as a whole for shopping, but also containers. It'll be a cool thing to experience, hopefully, to see how this is becoming more and more of a mainstream way of shopping. And in this case, it's right in Munich. All right, and then all around as we go through the city, and not just in Munich, but most every town and city we visit in southern Germany and Austria, we'll see signs of recycling, right? And these are just 4 bins, and these are the sort of the standard bins, and they're colored, they're color-coded. Greens for paper, reddish oranges for glass, yellow is for sort of artificial materials and cans, and then the Restmüll is like remaining garbage. Okay, the bit there. So we'll be checking out all the ways in which recycling plays a role in daily life in that part of the world. And we will visit a few museums, and one of them will be what's called the Alte Pinakothek in Munich. And the Alte means old, so that's the museum of a cluster of museums that focuses on older art. And here's an example of a lovely mountain landscape from the era of German Romanticism by David Caspar Friedrich from 1820. And this will be one of many examples of art that will feature aspects of the natural world. Many will be mountainous landscapes, but we'll see more than just dramatic mountain scenes in this museum in Munich. We'll prospectively have the chance to visit the Olympic Park in Munich, which was started on in the 1960s and completed in 1972 for the Olympic Games there. And since the 70s, it's served as a major green space for Munich. And I can note that it was basically built on rubble that was moved from the center and central areas of the city out to the outskirts after the Second World War. So it is this interesting intersection of how that rubble, I mean, these hills, these artificial hills that are basically built on rubble from the war. So it's quite really symbolic about changing that tragedy into something environmentally friendly and useful. And here we see the Olympic Stadium there. Okay, so not far from Munich is Salzburg, and I'm working out the schedule of whether we might do a day trip to Salzburg or if we just include Salzburg on our larger circuit through Austria. Salzburg literally means salt fortress. And the role of salt is indeed central to the history of Salzburg. It grew as a major economic center and trade center on account of the importance of salt as a commodity. Salt was essential, and salt was used for many purposes, including the preservation of food. And so, yes, it was something basic and thus coveted. And if you were in an area that had a lot of salt, like Salzburg, then you were sitting on prospective fortune, and that indeed helped Salzburg become a rather rich and important economic center right on the border of what would become Germany and Austria. Salzburg for centuries actually existed as an independent city. So that wasn't uncommon for cities that were fairly wealthy. They had their own municipality that they just shared among themselves. So there's, the Hohen Salzburg Fortress, that means high Salzburg, Hohen Salzburg, the largest intact medieval fortress that you'll find in Europe. So we'll take a tour of it. It would take a while to do a tour of the entirety of it, but we'll definitely get the chance to see some important parts of it and enjoy the views, as you can imagine from up there. The views from the fortress are quite lovely. And here's a shot of what's called the Getreidegasse. That's the historic old shopping street in the middle of Salzburg. Getreidegasse means grain street. So again, testifying to the importance of resources to the history of the city. And it articulates the important role of Salzburg as a commercial crossroads between the mountains and the plains. And in those mountains, in addition to salt, were and are minerals that support a significant iron industry in that part of Austria. So we'll talk about the importance of natural resources, how they connect to the history of cities, and how people are basically updating the way that they deal with such things as the pollutants that come with those industries. People don't normally think of Salzburg as close to polluted areas, but it's a reality. And we'll talk about that while we also enjoy the many charms of the lovely city of Salzburg, Austria. Another spot we'll have the chance to visit in Salzburg are the Mirabell Gardens that are part of a historical palace that's now a park, and this fits that phenomenon of former royal and aristocratic properties that eventually became open to the public, and it's a very popular place to visit for tourists, but also for locals. And Mirabel is one of the locations in Sound of Music. So coming back to what I was mentioning earlier. And a day trip that will very likely be a day trip from Munich will be to the aforementioned Neuschwanstein Castle. And here's a view of it. So those of you who are familiar with Disney World, Disneyland, Disney advertising, you'll hopefully recognize that, aha, this looks like a very likely model on which the Disney version is based. And so there it is with this wonderful dramatic alpine backdrop that we'll have the chance to enjoy. Even in rainy weather, you're close enough to the mountains there that you can usually see them. And if it happens to be on the day we visit, the clouds are actually really dramatic, and the mist and all, it actually can sometimes make for an even cooler atmospheric experience than on a bright sunny day. And one of the themes that we'll focus on connected to our visit to Neuschwanstein is looking at tourism and sustainability, right? Very important meeting point. Tourism in this part of Bavaria is huge. Millions of people visit these areas annually, and yet they are kept in fairly pristine condition. So we'll talk about ways in which that's achieved, and involves a lot of planning and a lot of orienting where people are allowed to go in larger groups, but also how they're limited to go into other areas. And here's a nice shot of, example of tourists visiting the castle. Also this rather pristine background there with the mountains. So I mentioned Murnau, the site of that early 20th century art colony. There we'll talk about the role of nature and culture and the relationship between the two and the local arts. Here's a shot of the town square, again with the Alps in the background. In southern Germany, the Alps will not be far from many of the things that we see and do. And here's an example of a painting. This is a more modern painting than the Friedrich painting we saw from 1820. This is from 1910, and this is from Mariana von Werefkin, a woman painter, and it's titled simply "Evening in Murnau." So here, this isn't typical nature as such, but we have wonderful natural elements that are blended into this village scene here with the moon and the sky, and the light. So we'll have the chance to enjoy visits to museums interspersed amid the other activities and excursions that we make. So here's a view from the train from Munich to Steyr, Austria. And Steyr is the city near which we'll have a planned visit to a family farm. And so just to give you a gist of what the landscape looks like, you see a little bit of the train track there. This is what much of that journey from Munich to that part of Austria looks like. And again, we're hoping it'll be just a nice restful stay. We'll get to be amid cows, and the host family has so far expressed their excitement to host some students from and to show us around the place and tell us about farm life in Austria, which should hopefully be interesting for us to hear about. We'll also then visit Vienna, again, the largest city in Austria. And these are two famous landmarks right at the center of the city. To the left here is St. Stephen's Cathedral, one of the largest Gothic cathedrals in the world. And then the so-called plague column. So we will talk about the perhaps unfortunate reality that diseases and dare one say pandemics are part of nature. And they are elements and realities that humans have been contending with for centuries. And these two landmarks, sort of in the context of, this was put up basically in thanks for the plague having come to an end at this time, the Baroque era. And then we'll talk about the role of spiritualism in nature as expressed in Gothic architecture. And we'll certainly be treated to one of the more famous Gothic churches in the world, let alone Germany and Austria with St. Stephen's Cathedral. Carissa, do you have the time? The chance?
It is 12:30.
12:30. Okay, great. Thank you. So don't have the clock up here with the slideshow. Okay, so hopefully this has been interesting here for Lily and for all of you out there zooming in. Again, thanks for coming to visit and joining along. We still have some more things to enjoy and venture through with the slides. Sticking here with Vienna, I'm planning to visit what's called the Belvedere Palace, one of the more famous and noteworthy, and I'd say beautiful, of Baroque palaces in Austria. And Belvedere means beautiful view. And indeed, this is the view from the palace. And it looks right down at the city. You might be able to make out St. Stephen's Cathedral there with the spire seen earlier. And every year there's a different motif that's featured in the garden. So we'll have the chance to talk about the role of gardens on mass scale, and of course their royal history, in this case imperial history. But then also how with time they became public open space. And so it's basically a huge, wonderfully manicured park. That's basically, from this view, it's in front of the palace, if you consider that facing toward the city. Then we'll talk a little bit about the role of garden design in different periods of time. These garden designs reflect aspects of the Baroque period from the 16 and 1700s, but also aspects of more modern garden design. So gardens themselves are this great merging of use of natural elements, plants, but also they involve art, right? And they involve creativity and a commitment to experiencing beauty, not just for kings, queens, empresses, and emperors, but for your everyday person, either as someone from Vienna or as a tourist. And we'll hopefully be able to enjoy that as visitors. So people might be familiar with the painter Gustav Klimt. The Belvedere Palace is now home to the Austrian National Gallery, and Klimt was an Austrian painter. And Klimt is one of the painters who's definitely featured in the Belvedere today. And so here we have this lovely painting, Field of Poppies from 1907, another example of this early 20th century period that's highlighted in Murnau, which I talked about just a bit ago outside of Munich. So Klimt's Field of Poppies is but one of many works from the early 20th century that are featured at the Belvedere, but there are works that highlight nature, natural things from throughout art history. So hopefully that'll be a fun way to have an interplay between the garden grounds outside the palace, the museum within the palace itself, and link that to other things that we'll see in Vienna that will help articulate themes of nature and environmentalism. And one such thing, and here actually, this is from an earlier plan that we weren't able to execute for the program, basically due to COVID restrictions. But in the initial plan, this was going to be on a Tuesday on May 25th. It probably won't be on Tuesday, May 25th, but who knows? Maybe I'll anchor the trip around making sure we're at the Vienna Zoo on either Tuesday or May 25th, because the two won't go together in 2023. So here on the left, we see the palace, the Schönbrunn Palace, one of the largest Baroque palaces in the world. And again, this is in Vienna, right? This is in the city, and you see all of the green space surrounding both the palace and the neighborhoods, right? When it was built in the 1600s, it was on the edge of the city, but today it is part of the urban web, as it were, that serves as this wonderful area of greenery and open space. And one of the famous components of Schönbrunn is the Vienna Zoo. The Vienna Zoo purports to be the oldest zoo in Europe. And I myself will say I am not the greatest fan of zoos, but I do feel it will be important and beneficial to look at the phenomenon of the zoo as another intersection between culture and nature, and how there is indeed a function of zoos that is important with regard to preservation of species, informing the public about the animal world. And we will have a chance to visit an iconic zoo on global terms, namely the Vienna Zoo. And as we can recognize, it is one of relatively few zoos in the world that does have pandas. Panda fans, it'll be something to see. Okay, this is a tentative plan here to visit the Imperial Palace's butterfly house. But if we do have the chance to go, it'll be an opportunity to experience the tropics in the middle of the city. So it's on our list of potential places to see. And these are a couple of lovely shots where you see the glass encasing, okay, of this garden, basically this atrium. And here's a nice closer up shot of one of the residents of the butterfly house here. And it is a fun place to visit and experience. Right, there is a green museum in Vienna. It's simply called the Green Museum, and it has a standing exhibit, but it also has temporary shows and exhibits highlighting various aspects of environmentalism and green culture. And it is housed within what's called the Hundertwasser House. Hundertwasser was an Austrian artist. He changed his name and just went by the term Hundertwasser, which literally means 100 water. And this is an example of his architecture and design. It's very creative and lively and colorful there in the midst of the green. But the Hundertwasser House, home of the Green Museum, was one of the first buildings built that incorporated plants and trees in its facade and on its roof, right? It's now becoming a more common practice to use plants as part of the design of the house. This is among the first major buildings that did that. So hopefully that'll be cool to check out, as well as the very interesting Green Museum. And this too is near the middle of the city in Vienna. This is also a work that Hundertwasser decorated. This was originally a non-Hundertwasser decorated power plant in North Vienna. And he had a proposal to spruce it up a bit and apply his style to create, something artistic that also represents the commitment in Austria, as well as in Germany, toward renewable resources as heating sources. So the Spittelau power plant is something actually interesting to check out, and we'll have a chance to visit it. I know the idea of visiting a power plant might not be that magnetic, but hopefully the Hundertwasser rendition here and its importance as a center of sustainable energy production will be something we recognize fitting in well with our program theme. And Vienna is indeed on the Danube River, one of the major rivers in Europe. And here we see that while the Vienna woods, from which this photo is taken, are indeed in hills, most of the city itself is on the flatlands next to the river. But the river is a source of recreation and open space. You may swim in it. There are beaches on the river. And that's also testimony to the commitment to environmental quality. A city of 2 million people is still able to enjoy a bit of nature along the river there, ride your bikes along it, take a stroll. You can even take a dip on one of the beaches there. Here's a nice view within the Vienna woods. Again, this is right on the outskirts of the city, and it's fair to say that this does not seem like a typically urban environment, and it's an example of the commitment in this part of the world to make sure that there's access to lovely green areas, and it's definitely a part of people's culture and their daily lives. Certainly in Vienna, they revere the Vienna woods, and they take care of the Vienna woods accordingly. And again, the role of water is important to urban life throughout the world, and we'll see how the role of the Danube Canal, which is an old branch of the river, it's right in the heart of the city, and people enjoy being close to the water, even in canal form. And we see the nice lights and the illumination of the bars and the restaurants and clubs that are along that space. And that'll be fun to visit at night when it's nicely colored and illuminated by that. So as mentioned, we'll also visit Graz, home to our partner, the University of Graz. Here we see a shot of the famous clock tower. That's kind of a signature structure in the city of Graz, home to Arnold Schwarzenegger, among other fairly famous people. Here's a shot from the university, and you can see that out your windows at the university, you can see these lovely classical and Baroque buildings around you in the neighborhood there. I'm making plans to visit the Institute of System Science, Innovation, and Sustainability Research, and we'll be able to learn cool things that they're doing at this center related to environmental sustainability, which is very important in Europe, a much more crowded place in the world than Montana, and we'll see the differences that emerge from that. And of the many cool things to see in and around Graz is the floating cafe. It's right in the middle of the Mur River, along which the center of the city is located. And it's a really cool thing to experience. You actually can go below, and then below you are right at the water surface, and you can actually go below the surface too. So it's hard to get more classically interactive between culture and nature than the floating cafe. And of course, since it's Europe, it's not just a floating thing, it's a floating cafe. So hopefully we would have the chance to enjoy some treats literally on the river, either in the evening or sometime during the day. And here is an image of the mountain landscape in Styria, which is the state in which Graz is located. So again, the cow theme. We will undoubtedly encounter some cattle. And this is a nice shot of how cows, they'll just be wandering around the alpine landscapes as people hike. And I'm working on this, okay? This has not been confirmed. But between now and the plans, I'm hoping to get a visit set up to the Zotte chocolate factory. It's a sustainable chocolate factory, about an hour from Graz. So that would give us the chance to see some of the local landscape. And it's described by many as the real Willy Wonka chocolate factory. So that's currently in the plans as well. And then we would end up back in Munich. The trip is planned as a circuit. So from Munich, basically through those parts of Austria. And I'm tentatively planning to have a couple of visits still in Munich before the program ends, including to the botanical garden. So again, this theme of the garden as this meeting point of culture and the natural world in interesting and lovely ways. And then coming back to the water theme, you know, in this landlocked part of Europe, still water is featured and adored and played with in the urban landscape. And this is a shot from the Nymphenburg Palace in the western part of the city, but it is within the city. And this would conceivably be one of the last places that we visit for wrapping things up. And that will take place certainly with the final group dinner. And just to give us an aerial view of this lovely city. Munich and Vienna, by the way, always rank among the world's most livable cities. On any survey, you'll commonly see the best places to live in the world. And both Munich and Vienna are always high up on the list. And hopefully, those who are able to come on the trip will see why and how the natural world, the inclusion of nature and the proximity of nature play really important roles in maintaining that sort of high quality of life over there. So thanks again for people zooming in, and thanks Lily for coming, and thanks Carissa for your help. And here's my contact information, which you can find elsewhere. But again, I hope you can come join the adventure in summer of 2023.
Just asked if anybody had any questions for you. I didn't see any in the chat, but
I did see a something in chat here.
It's just me asking.
Oh, there you go.
So,
okay, all right.
Yeah.
So again, I just shared my contact information. Caleb is asking what the process for signing up will be like. So the schedule would be for me to have things approved and ready to sign up for in the fall of 2022. And I'll certainly keep people informed about that. But there is an application process that is actually run through the Global Engagement Office for these kinds of programs. And you'll be asked information about yourself. You'll be invited to offer a statement as to why you're interested in the program, and they'll be checking some things about you to make sure that you're in good academic shape to take part of the program, things along those lines. And Ava here is asking, okay, yeah, important question. Thanks, Ava. We will mostly be staying in hostels. That's the plan at this point. It might change, but the default plan would be to stay in hostels in the various cities in which we're located. And that's also why I'm incorporating some day trips, such as to Murnau and to Neuschwanstein. That way we wouldn't have to uproot and go to the different cities and towns, because that takes some time. So if we center ourselves in Munich for a little while, we'd be able to do those day trips, but still stay in a hostel. Thanks for bringing it up, Ava. I intended to mention that. I'm glad you brought me to do that. Okay. Any other questions or curiosities?
Sounds like a great trip.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Chris. Again, all right. Thanks everybody for joining us, and thanks again, Lily. And hopefully this is something that's going to continue interesting you after the presentation here. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Right there. Perfect. And then yes.
To the cloud?
Yep.